Hey, what's up everybody, Cappuccino here, and this is the Reinhardt Earthshatter guide. This will be part 1 out of a 2-part series, and today we're going to be going over how to use your Earthshatter. Earthshatter, like Graviton and other big ultimates, are game-changing ultimates because they can easily turn around a fight or turn around a push that may not be going so well because it can immobilize a large group of enemies. So that's why it's really important to know how to use your Earthshatter effectively. Earthshatter is part of the Rein vs. Rein metagame, in which there's a game within the actual Overwatch game between you and the Reinhardt, and you guys are just kind of duking it out, trying to play mind games against each other and get the upper hand for your team to create space and to create plays. As I mentioned before, this is part 1 out of a 2-part series, and in this part we are going to be going over how to effectively use your Earthshatter. First, we're going to talk about when's the right time to shatter. Then we are going to talk about what to do right before you shatter. And lastly, what to do right after you land that shatter. Let's go over a few obvious times when you should shatter. One is when the enemy Rein dies. So if you guys focus him down, you land a good charge, he dies, that's a free shatter for your team. Another one is if his shield is broken. The same goes, that's a free shatter for your team. There's nothing to block it. And lastly, if the enemy Reinhardt isn't even there, maybe he's in the back of the team, the rest of the team's in front, you should definitely go for that shatter. Unfortunately, those opportunities don't always happen, so sometimes you have to go with the other more riskier opportunities. One of them would be if he starts swinging blindly at you and he's just playing all-out aggressive. Sometimes that usually happens when he's nano boosted. You can get a good shatter opportunity from that. Other times, some Reinhardts are kind of asleep on the wheel when they're behind the payload, and sometimes you forget that you can get shattered behind the payload. Another one would be between the enemy Reinhardt's fire strike. This one requires a lot of practice and is probably one of the much more riskier ones. I only do this when I really need to land a shatter. There's a specific animation that happens right before he fire strikes, and that's kind of your cue to squeeze in a shatter in between. You would usually count down from the last time he executed a fire strike, and after you count down that cooldown, you can expect him to fire strike again. Another opportunity would be right after you block his shatter. A lot of Reins, at least the ones I've seen below Diamond, immediately start swinging or try to charge at you right after, even if they didn't actually shatter you. So that works for a good counter shatter. The last one's a little more riskier than the other ones, and that's while your team is in Graviton. Similar to when the Rein shatters you, he often tries to go ahead and swing at you, and sometimes they forget that you actually might have Earthshatter. And in that case, you can do a counter shatter and knock down the entire enemy team and possibly saving them from getting wiped out by Graviton, and possibly even in turn wiping out their team. Last couple of notes regarding when to use your Earthshatter. You need to practice these techniques and strategies because I did my best to try to explain it, but you don't really know how to fully execute it until you try it a few times. There's going to be some failures, but hopefully you learn from them. Secondly, you want to be aware of the Zarya bubble cooldowns because those can block your shatters. So you need to keep track when she uses them and when they're off cooldown. Now we're going to be going over details for executing your shatter. The first thing you want to do is communicate to your team that you have shatter and you plan to use it. That's really important because if they're down on the ground, you want all your team to capitalize on this opening. So that's the first thing. Another thing would be to make sure that you have at least 300 health or so. Maybe a little less might be okay, but shattering when you have low health is extremely risky because there's a little period where you don't have any shield open and they could easily kill you during that time, and you just waste your ultimate by doing that. Lastly, I tried to go for at least 2 or more enemies to get the full value out of the ultimate. The only exception for maybe only one enemy would be if it was a priority enemy that has the ability to wipe out our team, such as a nano-bladed Genji or nano-visor soldier. Now I'm going to be going over what to do right after you land that shatter. The first thing I want to say is do not immediately charge after, unless you can't execute the following steps that I'm about to go over. It's just a waste and it throws your enemies everywhere, and your team cannot focus down people when they're going to be thrown around in the air. Now that I've got that out of the way, the first thing you want to do is to line up your enemies and throw a fire strike to hit as many enemies as possible. While you do that, you want to start walking forward and swing at as many enemies as you can. And lastly, you want to charge whatever enemy is left. I want to emphasize that most of the time I find that charging doesn't really happen in my Earthshatters because it's a lot more effective to get that splash damage in and keeping the enemies on the ground where your team can capitalize on your shatter more easily. When you charge, you have to be more aware of other enemies that weren't downed that might interrupt your charge with things such as bubbles, stuns, or any other protective abilities. I want to add one last note that if you do not shatter the Reinhardt, you may not be able to even engage any of the down enemies because you will have to keep your shield up to protect your team from the counter shatter. You're going to have to just trust your teammates that they're going to start picking off people that are downed and not put your shield down. And now we will watch some live gameplay footage of me exhibiting some of the things we went over in this video. In this clip, Anna lands an amazing sleep on the Reinhardt, and then I proceed to recognize there's no shield and shatter the rest of the team. Notice that I follow the steps I've outlined, which is to shatter, throw a fire strike, and start swinging. I did not even try to charge. Here I have shatter, and I recognize that the Reinhardt is not shielding two of his teammates, and also the Zarya has just used her personal bubble, so that means that there's two people open to shatter. I go ahead and do that, and then clean up afterwards with a fire strike followed by a few swings. Here I knew that the Reinhardt did not have shatter, so I went ahead and left my team to go for a shatter flank, which was executed successfully. Notice I shattered, threw a fire strike, and then proceeded to swing at the team. My fire strike probably could have been lined up a little bit better, but overall, that was executed well. In this clip, the Reinhardt goes for a pretty bad charge and misses me, which exposes his entire team to my shatter. But I want to point out that my health was under 300, so this shatter was actually really risky. In this case, I was able to pull it off. But notice that I keep my shield up and allow my team to go ahead and take care of the down enemies. It's very tempting to start attacking the enemies that you've downed, but sometimes you just have to hold up your shield and hope that your team is able to capitalize on your shatter. That's it for part 1. Stay tuned for part 2 of the Earthshatter guide, where I'm going to be going over how to defend and keep track of your enemy Rein's ultimate.